The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery, and of course I'm Al Warren. Now we got Mr. Martini on the other side of the planet.
I'm right here making martinis.
Yeah, of course you are. Yeah, always. You're going to have to check into the same rehab as Will Smith. I don't know what it's for, but you're checking in because you don't want to lose your movies are going to go down. You know,
That's right.
They're dropping like flies. You know, get in there. You know. Anyway, that's enough. I shouldn't make fun. It's a terrible situation.
No. It is.
Earth-shattering. Well, anyway, so now we've got a new writer on. So we're breaking in quite a few people here. You know, we'll see if they can make it through our show. They might have a chance. And this time we're talking about the book that's called The Lives of Diamond Bessie, and it's a novel. And the author is Jody Hadlock. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a great day. Thank you.
Well, we'll see. I wonder, you know, when I first see the outline for it and it's saying pregnant out of wedlock 16-year-old Annie Moore, sounded like my young life. I always look at stories like this and I think, okay, so what kind of experience do you pull in to put this into a book? Like, I'm not saying you, but I'm just saying, well, yeah, you, but I'm saying because when someone reads it, it's got to read true to form. They got to really kind of go, this character's real. This is a real, I believe this person. And so it always grabs me when it's something that's kind of tragic in a sense of do you bring in people you know or real life experiences, or how do you develop that?
Well, the main character was a 19th century prostitute. I've never been a prostitute, luckily, but I was fortunate enough to find 3 memoirs of late 19th century prostitutes that were absolutely fascinating. They were riveting. And so I mined them for all they were worth. That really helped. And then, of course, just, you know, sinking down and, you know, trying to get into the mind of your character. And since my novel is based on true events and real people, I mean, some of it is fictionalized, of course, but because it's, you know, a lot of the things that happened in the book really happened, and I had to really think hard of thinking through what Bessie's motivations were, why she made the choices that she did. And it was challenging, I have to say. So I really put a lot of thought into it, a lot of drafts.
I would say, yeah, because you know, if you've got memoirs from people that were actually doing that kind of work and living that life, you're going to get an insight, obviously, to their character of why they do things and think things and stuff. But I just wonder, because it's so long ago, how much different it really was. Like, did you find large differences in the way they reacted to things?
Well, you know, this was obviously a much different time. You had the women's rights movement going on, and, you know, delving into why a woman became a prostitute at that time. You know, so much of it, you know, the women's rights movement and prostitution, you know, they were kind of tied together because it was the lack of rights, the lack of opportunities for women that often drove them into prostitution. So, yeah, that was really interesting as far as my research and learning about all that.
How do you decide what line you're going to draw? Like when you're centering it around true events, you know, it's historical and you've got some real things happening, and then you're throwing in fictional events and characters as well. How do you decide what is going to be real and what's not? I don't know if you kind of get what I'm saying.
Well, no, I know exactly what you're saying. Not much is known about Bessie as far as her upbringing and what happened before she became a prostitute. There's a little bit. So I really had to make it up. I had to fictionalize it. And so it was through my research is looking into what were the consequences for a woman at that time who became pregnant out of wedlock. And I don't want to say everything that's fact and fiction right now because I don't want to spoil it for everyone. But so I had to, I found out about the Magdalen laundries of the 19th century, the convents for fallen women, etc. So, I looked for things that I could use that, that were plausible, and then developed the plot from there. It took a lot of work, a lot of drafts, a lot of drafting, and with the research to get it to the point where I felt like I had a good story.
How did you get into this story? Like, what led you to decide to write the lives of Dime and Bessie?
Well, it was a long time ago. Kind of embarrassed to say how long ago it was, but I used to be a journalist. I was a broadcast journalist, TV news reporter and anchor, but I'd always wanted to write novels. I knew that, and I really enjoyed journalism while I was in it, but I always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to write a novel. I just didn't know what I wanted to write about, what I wanted to say. And when my husband and I were dating, he's from East Texas, so we went to meet his parents, and then my husband said, let's take a little day trip over to Jefferson. And this is just 3 hours east of Dallas. I grew up in the suburb of Dallas, Irving. I'd never heard of Jefferson. And I was like, Jefferson, where's that? And then we go there, and I find out it was an inland river port in the mid-1800s. This is in northeast Texas. I was like, an inland river port? What in the world? So we went to the historical museum, and I'll never forget, I was walking down an aisle, and at the end, there was a display case, and it had a full-page newspaper article about Diamond Bessie and Abe Rothschild. And it was a Dallas paper in the 1930s that wrote a full-page article with drawings about something that had happened in this tiny town of 2,000 people about 60 years earlier. And I remember I was immediately intrigued. And I read the article, and I thought, why was this paper so interested in this so, long after? And then I had another thought, but I don't want to give away the plot. And that I was immediately hooked. At the time, I was working at the CBS affiliate in Charleston, South Carolina, as a weekend news anchor and reporter. And I made I'll tell you how long ago it was, so you'll understand why I had to wait to do the research. This was in the mid-90s, early to mid-90s. And so I made a vow that when I got back to Texas, I would look into the story. So this is really before the internet and before newspapers.com, which is a godsend. So it took me 2 years I got a job anchoring the news in San Antonio, Texas. And as soon as I moved back in 95, I immediately started my research, and I spent all my spare time on the weekends. I had to do interlibrary loan. It was a lot more work back then to do research. It's so much easier now. And then for a lot of reasons, I set aside my writing and then came back to it in 2014.
It's quite different. I don't think people realize nowadays how much harder it really was being a reporter, But what was it that happened in 2014 then that you decided you were going to go ahead with the book?
Well, when I did the research in the 90s, and then I had an outline, and I sat down to write, and I sat in front of my computer, and I couldn't, I was like, oh my God, I didn't really think about I was so focused on the research and outlining this plot, and I didn't really, think about the creative, part of it. And then I had the wrong point of view. So then I got really frustrated. And so then I adopted my son from Romania in the late 90s, and he has developmental disabilities. So I was really focused on that and my career. By then I was not in journalism anymore. I was working at a place in Washington, D.C., and it was just crazy. And I didn't realize at the time I didn't have the right point of view. So I was just floundering, and I thought, I was really disappointed in myself. I set it aside. And then, so that was around 2000 or so. And then when I moved back to Texas in 2009, and I was married to someone else and went through a divorce, came back to Texas. And in 2004, I haven't said this to anyone. I really, to be honest, I was going through a tough time, and this writing really kind of saved me. I was really struggling with what I wanted to do with my life, and I just for a number of reasons. And I thought about, I had carried around this research in my drafts with me for years. They went everywhere with me. And I picked it up, and I was like, I really want to work on this again. And at the time, because I had struggled so much to write it as fiction, I thought, well, maybe I'll do nonfiction. And then I went to the Dallas-Fort Worth Writers Conference in 2014, and basically for that, I hooked up with a freelance editor because I thought, well, maybe I need some help. And after a few months of working with my wonderful editor, Bridget Bolwin, we both said, this really needs to be a novel. And then she challenged me to write it from a particular point of view, which I don't want to spoil the plot. So once I said, well, I don't know if I can do that. And she said, just try. So I did that, and I wrote the first chapter in 2 days. Now, that chapter is not the first chapter anymore, and there's probably just a few words from it. But it was once I found my voice, everything fell into place. And then I got the first draft done in 7 months. And then since then, I found I needed to develop the plot more. I added more elements to it. Basically, what's published today is completely different from that first draft. I mean, I didn't realize at the time how much editing you needed to do. The writing is rewriting.
Yeah.
So believe me, I learned the hard way.
Oh yeah. But I think, honestly, coming from that, you kind of have to go through that to find your voice, if that makes sense. You have to go through all those rough spots in the editing and all that to kind of get to a point where you're comfortable just writing the story then.
Yes.
So
I will say the journey has been worth it. There were times where I was just like banging my head on the desk and, why can't I get this? What am I doing wrong? But now I'm just overjoyed at it's evolved in so many more ways than I ever imagined. And so I'm really proud of what I put out. I know it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I think that, I think some readers will enjoy it.
You just don't go on the road driving crazy.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about struggling with finding the right point of view, and you eventually decided on first-person narration for this novel. Do you feel that got you closer to the character and able to kind of like maybe hear the thoughts and motivations of your character?
Oh yeah, once I started writing it, in the first person, and I did have to. You do have to really like dig deep, and I just kept having to do that, and for me that came out, and it took draft after draft. I mean, maybe some people can just get it all out at once and go blah, and it's all there, and then start shaping it. For me, I guess it was more like an onion, but in the reverse, where you're like adding layer after layer.
Reverse crying.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The whole process. Yeah. But with this whole process, that at the end of the day, the book comes out today. So someone picks it up and reads it. What is it that you hope to take away from that book?
Well, one thing is it's how far women have come since then, since the mid-1800s. Made a lot of strides, and I know there's always room for improvement, but really we have it pretty darn good today. And so I wanted to show what the struggles were, really like for a lot of women back then, because so much of the fiction that we read today from that, that time is like a wealthy woman, trying to find a husband or whatever. So that just, how the struggles of women then and how far we've come. And then also to be forgiving of ourselves, not just of others, but also of ourselves.
Yeah, it's amazing how much some of the movies or shows you see that talk about 100 years ago or so, or even longer, kind of avoid certain subjects, avoid certain in very much detail. You know, they just sort of gloss over it in a way.
Yes, and I don't know why I'm drawn to. I was drawn to what you would call a marginalized voice, but because I wrote about a 19th century prostitute, and someone who didn't really have a voice back then. And I do have, there's one scene in my novel, how I incorporated the women's rights movement is, I learned that Susan B. Anthony gave a speech on social purity, which partly focused on prostitution. It was so taboo back then to say the word prostitution. It was referred to as the great social evil. But she gave a speech on social purity, her first talk on it, in Chicago at the Grand Opera House on March 14th, 1875, at a time when Bessie was in Chicago. So, of course, I have her attend this lecture. And, but back then, women, I would like to think that she and some of her fellow prostitutes were at that lecture, cheering on somebody who was, a champion for rights for all women.
Do you think it was in probably Bessie and her friends' minds that they wanted to be independent? They wanted more rights as females?
It's really interesting because, and I know there's been a paper done on this, but and the title was something like that prostitutes in the 19th century were some of the most independent and, freest and wealthiest, which is just bizarre because they didn't have as many rights. But, back then it was, a woman didn't go somewhere unescorted. She didn't go alone. She didn't travel alone. Well, prostitutes, they moved about freely, but it came at the cost of their reputation. They were societal outcasts. They couldn't acknowledge anybody on the street. They would only respond if somebody said something to them. And they could be, if somebody knew that they were suspected of being a demi-mondaine, they might, draw back their skirts to avoid contact with them. So it was really an interesting dichotomy, I guess, that they made more money doing that than they could being a shop girl or working at a factory. In fact, it was so bad as far as the wages for women back then that oftentimes if there was a woman who worked at a factory, she might have to supplement her job by meeting a man or men at what they called assignation houses. So they were places for illicit sex. So you might have a wealthy woman who goes off and she's having an affair with her husband's best friend, or you have this woman who works at a factory and to make ends meet, she'll meet someone at this assignation house and be paid for sex.
Oh, now I know why Dave calls his house that. I had no idea what that meant. I thought it was just...
Now you know.
You're going to get me in trouble.
Now I know what's going on there, Jeez. He always told me it was just the cats meowing. But I learn something new every day, I'll tell you. So when you go through this at the end of the book too now, and you've completed this, and you look back, can you spot changes in yourself from going through this experience?
Oh, wow. Spot changes in myself.
Like, did you come out of it the same person as when you went into it? Like, after completing the story and going through the emotions and the ups and downs and all of the situations, especially from the times. So at the end of it, I'd imagine you learned quite a bit. But how does it feel now? Is it different for you?
Well, it was such a tumultuous journey. There were so many ups and downs, and there's so much rejection. So I felt stronger. I feel, today I feel joyful. This is better than my actual birthday. Your pub day is so much better than your birthday. And it makes me excited for the future that I want to write more stories. It's given me more confidence. I also I love to write screenplays. I've never had anything produced, but I co-wrote one and it won the Dallas International Film Festival's 2020 screenplay contest, and I love that kind of writing, and I think winning that festival gave me more confidence, not just for screenwriting, but also for my novel writing, just as a writer in general. So it's just, now that I'm here and I can look back at everything that I went through, I feel a sense of accomplishment. And and I have, I'm already researching my second novel, so I'm just going to keep going full steam ahead.
Did you lose your driver's license during that time?
Well, you mentioned screenplays. Do you feel that writing a screenplay affected how you approach writing novels?
Yeah, I realize maybe it's the journalism background that, because, especially for broadcast journalism or TV news, you're writing conversationally, it's concise, shorter sentences. So when I decided, to write a screenplay, it was a story that I really wanted to tell, and I thought the best way would be a screenplay, and so I decided to attempt it, and I fell in love with it. And I realized that I don't know if you could see that in my novel writing, but I like shorter chapters. You get into the scene as late as possible, out as early as possible, even in my novel. So I feel like there's some crossover there that I feel personally. And I absolutely love screenwriting.
Maybe that's what you'll end up doing. Who knows?
Well, I don't know. I really, there was a while where I thought, maybe I should focus on this. But now that my book is out, and now I'm like, no, that this is worth it. I really enjoy this. I feel like I'm getting better at it. And so, because I think the screenwriting just kind of helped boost me, and crossed over with the novel writing. And so I will write another novel, and I'll continue to write screenplays as I can. It's just that it's so hard to get something produced. Much more costly than a book.
Yeah. It's a different world too.
Oh, yeah,
It's
totally
changing.
different.
Streaming and all that. Are you going to be doing like a web page and how do you like to interact with your fans or readers, or do you?
Oh yeah. I on Instagram, and I have to say today's been insane with the pub day that I'm barely keeping up with everything on Instagram today, but I'm there as just my name, Jody Hadlock, Jody Had as in dog, LOCK. And I have a Facebook author page. It's Jody Hadlock Author. And I love getting feedback. And I'm on Goodreads. I've gotten a lot of reviews there, and really excited that my book made a bunch of lists like Pop Sugar, BookBub, Goodreads. So that's been fun to see. And I just, I know that some people are, not going to like the plot twist, but some people do. People either love it or hate it. There's like no in between, is, the feedback that I've gotten so far.
I think that's good. As long as you can handle the bad comments or the bad, the people that say they don't like it. I think it's good. I think it's good to have an opinion and be out there with it.
Yeah, and I have to say the good reviews far outweigh the bad ones. That's who I'm writing. That's who I wrote it for. It's so wonderful when people get what you've written, what you were trying to do. And, those are the people that I'm trying to reach. And, it's just, there's so many books published all the time, every week. It's hard to break through the noise. But so I really appreciate you talking to me about my book, and hopefully some people that listen will be interested in checking it out.
Well, is there someone that did a bad review that we can go after? I like doing that. I like taunting these people.
Let me tell you, it is kind of hard sometimes to, bite the bullet and not say anything, especially if it's wildly wrong. I had somebody accuse me of, This is real people, true story, didn't make the main characters' names up. And somebody took exception to, did not like the fact that I named the villain Abe Rothschild because it had undertones of anti-Semitism. And I'm thinking, did you read the book description? This is inspired by a true story. You can Google Diamond Bessie and see all kinds of stuff. Abe Rothschild was a real person. It was not intentional to make, him be Jewish and make him look bad. So you run into that stuff and you're like, what?
Well, and that's only the touch of it. Wait, it's going to get worse. So.
Yeah.
And we encourage people, please, by all means, just load it up. Give her all the bad stuff.
I can take it. I'm tough.
She can take it.
Right.
Well, you just find them like I do and then hunt them down and ruin their life.
Yeah.
There's nothing better. There's nothing better than that.
A lot of satisfaction.
Well, and I don't think you want to stay away from that anyway. You don't want to get focused on that because that takes you off your drive or your goal to write a good book.
Yes.
You start focusing on the noise, and it does no good for you. So yeah, just keep on going. Don't stop. Do you worry about being politically correct then in these times?
You mean as far as
Well, like how all of a sudden someone comes up and it's so particular nowadays that if you use a certain phrase or certain words, you use Rothschild. So, you've got this, so you don't like Jews. You're going to get this. Are you worried about using, just having that comment itself, doesn't it make you a little bit, I don't want to say paranoid, but you have to kind of go, oh my God.
Well, that surprised me. Because, and that didn't even cross my mind because it, was a real person. So I was totally taken aback that I got that criticism. But, I think in these times now, people are so, I think, almost overly sensitive about some things. Yeah. And I will say in writing, because I was writing something that happened about 150 years ago, and there were words, used at the time that are totally unacceptable today. And we can guess what those are. And so, yeah, I really had to, and of course I didn't want to use certain words, but, I had to, it's really a balancing act to, you got to portray the times as they were, but it's for a modern audience. And that can be a little bit challenging. I think especially in today's days.
Yeah, it's daunting. I just had a deal with a publisher where they wanted, and it was about crimes in the 1920s, and they used the word ghetto, and the publisher didn't want that word used.
Why?
They would rather have it called working class neighborhood than ghetto, even though the boys themselves said that word. That was their own language, and I was kind of like, well, yeah, you're right, but at the same point, this is what they actually said. We can't change what they're saying to each other to make it sound politically correct now.
Oh, exactly. I don't know if you're familiar with, there's this wonderful thing called Google Ngram Viewer. I don't know if you've ever used it.
Yeah.
And because I did that with so many words and phrases to see what was, commonly used at the time. And not all of them were controversial, but I couldn't say African American in my book because they didn't use that at all back then. And I also didn't want to use, obviously, the other word. So, I had to,
Will Smith will come slap you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to get that.
Yeah. But, I'm 55. I'll be 56 this month. I grew up, ghetto was a word that I don't think of it as being maybe as negative. People see it that negative today.
For me, I don't like changing words of characters when they're real characters, when they say something, because it's real.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think of that word as in a broader sense, but that made me think of one word that I used, inmate. The word inmate used to have a much broader definition than it does today. Inmate, it just, it would refer to if there are several occupants of any place. It could be a convent, an asylum, a hospital. Now we associate inmate with just with a prison or jail. But back then it was used much more broadly. And I tried to do that in my novel, but what the feedback I got from, beta readers, et cetera, was that they were confused by me using the more expansive, definition of it. So I had to, rework that where, I could use it, but it made sense to today's readers.
Using those fancy words.
Yeah.
do you know, 5 years ago or so, when I interviewed Jack McCullough for a book, who was put away for a murder in the late 50s, I believe, and the first time I met him, he wanted me to know that the first thing that America started going downhill the moment they let a woman go to work. And right then I knew I was in trouble. Because how am I going to write the things he's saying and not get attacked for some aspect of it, even though you're trying to tell his story? But I went with it. And I kind of focused on, well, this guy's an awful human being. Just the things he said and did were just terrible. But I wanted people to know, this guy's an awful person. You wouldn't want him to come over for dinner. But he didn't kill this girl. So you can't just put away people because you don't like them, even though we'd all like to sometimes. Yeah. The bottom line is you can't just put away someone for a crime they didn't commit because he's a terrible person. Right. Instead, you gotta, you move them away, move them to Boston. Yeah.
Oh no!
But is that where David is?
Yeah, that's his house. That special room.
Special room.
Yeah. No, you know what I'm saying. I just wonder about, because I've been noticing that myself in the world. There's a real, with the publishers and with readers and stuff, picking out things, and especially when you're dealing with old times, because people didn't behave, talk, and act like they do now. Yes. They certainly weren't conscious of being correct. You imagine being a they in 1920. Yeah. You know what I mean? Say, well, I'm, I recognize myself as a girl, let's say, or something, or a female. Like, it was just that you couldn't be time appropriate. That's all. Oh, so, yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it definitely is a consideration. I think most historical fiction readers, obviously are cognizant of that, or at least I hope they are if they like to read historical fiction. Well, hopefully, but I've come across a few. Yeah, I'll pass them on. We all will and have. So, where do you want to see yourself go now? Like, what's going to happen to you in the future? Do you think? Where are you heading? Oh, well, I definitely want to write another novel. I say unfortunately. I learned about this story while researching Diamond Bessie. The thing is, though, part of it would be set in Russia, which is not really a favorable country right now. So I was hoping to go to Russia next year to do some research. And I'm like, it's just horrible what's going on right now. And who knows what it's going to be like next year. If it'd be safe to go if I even want to go, but it would be, the second book would be set in 1858 to about 1880s. It would be set in Russia and the U.S. So I may have to do everything remotely. And of course, I always have to do some of it remotely because I don't speak Russian, so I have to have some help with that. But I think it's always good to go to the place, experience it, the atmosphere and what it looks like and feels like and sounds like, etc. So we'll see. Yeah. You always pick up something, some sort of vibe from being in a location in a country or town or something, I find. Oh, definitely. And I did that with Bessie. I even went to Ireland. She was born in Ireland, and saw her, the area where she was born in County Cork. And I went to I think every place that she lived or even almost visited. Unfortunately, almost every building was gone, but it was still good to go to Cincinnati and all the other places. So it was still good to experience it, but it was disappointing that so many buildings were gone. Partly because I love historical buildings, and there was this gorgeous
Cincinnati Public Library that from the mid 1870s until 1950, it was built to be an opera house, all marble. I mean, gorgeous. And the city tore it down in the 50s to make way for their ugly building that they have now. I hate to say that about a library, but it makes me sick every time I think about that particular building being gone. And I actually include it in my novel. I had to, because it was just, it was such a great place.
Well, at least they didn't put up a Walmart. I mean, it could always be worse. Now, I noticed like the classification genre, I guess you'd say. You mentioned a lot about suspense, and you mentioned ghost and ghost fiction and paranormal and stuff. What is your experience with paranormal, and how does that get incorporated into your book?
Well, it's interesting because little old Jefferson, Texas has a paranormal conference. I missed it this year, but a couple of years ago I went, and it was really, they have the little equipment, where they'll go into a house and, I don't know if I really experienced anything, but it was interesting. And actually, when we were listening to a lecture in this convention center, and somebody mentioned afterwards that the temperature had dropped by like 10 degrees in the room, so there was stuff like that where it was being attributed to, paranormal. Who knows if it was, but the reason why, my book crosses genres. It's historical fiction / mystery. It's more of a whodunit than a whodunit. It's been described as historical suspense, and it has paranormal elements. So it's got a lot of things going on. It was called genre bending by Kirkus Reviews. And reviewers, some other reviewers have noted that it was the best way it was the way the story needed to be told. It wasn't that I set out to write those three things. It was just the best way to tell the entire story and not just part of it. I didn't want it to end on a particular event. I wanted the story to continue, and that was the way that I could do it.
Yeah, it's an interesting aspect, and a lot of people talk about, ghosts and paranormal, and it's really kind of an in thing, and so to speak. In that, did you research kind of or look into see how people considered paranormal events and stuff back then?
Oh yeah, well the spiritualist movement was huge, and that's also obviously in my book pretty prominently, but. Yeah, they were found out to be frauds later on, but there were was it the Fox sisters? I'm trying to remember, in the 1840s, I believe, where either the Hyde sisters or Fox sisters. That anyway, they claimed to be communicating with a spirit in their house, and then they were traveling like to Europe and stuff. And then of course everybody was having seances. So this was huge back in the 1800s. So yeah, that plays a pretty prominent role in my story for obvious reasons. And it was really interesting to do that research because even I heard that Arthur Conan Doyle, that he was. This went like through the 1920s, I believe.
Right. Yeah. It was big, and that was kind of the talking boards and the Ouijas and stuff when people, I guess a lot of, and we don't realize this, but there wasn't the communication and the traveling ability back then. And people, your kids go away to war, and you don't know if they're coming back. And if you get a letter that they've died, there was no communication. And I guess that really brought in an increase to that sort of witch boards and talking boards and stuff.
Oh, I'm sure, and probably after the Civil War, I can imagine. I can't even imagine what that would be like to, somebody go off to war back then, and then you get a letter a year later that your child has died and you hadn't seen them or talked to them, or it's very different back then.
So many were just missing in action, or they had just had mass graves with a lot of people dead, and they didn't know what happened, and so they got that, and so they had to reach out to a spiritualist or some sort of a reader to find out what happened, to connect and that. So there was a huge influx of that going on. it was just a crazy time, but way different than it is now. But they didn't have the ability to communicate like we do now.
Right. If I look back then and that happened, I might want to try it too.
Well, yeah, why not? I mean, what have you got to lose, really?
Yeah, you might get a special message. Who knows?
Yeah, you never know. It's not like you'd see on TV or a movie now. But it's certainly a different time, and I think those little subtleties really come across when you're, reading or doing something from that time. I think it's a great addition to the book. So that's good.
Yeah,
that's
well,
really
and
good.
And it just made me think of something that you might be interested in, because I feel like Bessie's spirit has guided me. I know some people are going to think I'm nuts and like, woo, but I did have, I don't know if you've heard about this happening where, a character just shows up, or if it's happened to you. But I was sitting at my desk and I was thinking about Ed Levine's, one of the characters, and how I was going to, what role she was going to have in the story. And I promised you, I felt this strong presence so much that I'm alone in the house. I actually turned around to see who was behind me. And I said, okay, Edla, you're going to be prominent. I mean, I was like, she was telling me that she wanted, and I don't want to get too much to give away too much of the plot, but I have an affection for Edla and Bessie's friendship in the story. And she's a prominent role because I felt her presence while I was writing about her.
Well, that's interesting, and I've had that a lot before with even, true crime writers and stuff like, I think Mark Shaw was one that, because Dorothy Kilgallen, that she was on the that What's My Line and stuff like that, and she died, as they say, mysteriously, and she had just interviewed Jack Ruby after he killed Lee Harvey Oswald with the Kennedy assassination, and then she ended up dead in her apartment. So he says that she would visit him. And so he wrote a book about and researched her life. So I've heard that before. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but the same idea.
Well, it was really freaky. I mean, it is a thing, and it's.
Were you drinking?
Creepy to people. What was that?
Were you drinking?
No. It was the middle of the afternoon.
Well, that hasn't stopped people before.
That doesn't stop me.
No.
I started drinking.
Yeah, he doesn't know when to stop. So, I mean, you just, daytime, nighttime, hang out in the basement. Wow. So let's talk about your favorite things to do. Like, what kind of books do you read? Or how do you think you get inspired?
Oh, well, I'm an eclectic reader. I will read anything that holds my attention. So I read pretty much every genre, except I would like to read science fiction and fantasy. I just haven't done that, but it's on my list. But pretty much anything and I love nonfiction too. I read a lot of nonfiction as well.
So I'm one of the biggest influences then. Reading my books, right? You're supposed to say you always pick the host. Come on, like I just. We have to get on that. We'll have to edit that one out so you make sure that. Of course, you're my biggest influence. I couldn't write without it.
Well, if there's somebody that I don't know if she's an influence, but I think her writing is just incredible. Is Hilary Mantel. She wrote the Wolf Hall trilogy, and about Thomas Cromwell. Cromwell is the protagonist, and I just, her sentences are like nesting dolls, and just incredible.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how you can be influenced by certain people like that can do something,
Well, it's like aspiring, the writers that it's like, I don't know if I would ever be able to write like that person, but I just, I can only do what is me.
Yeah. You're going to write like your person, but it might be, influential for you.
Yeah,
and stuff like
maybe
that.
make me elevate my writing, so to speak.
Yeah, or you make it worse.
That's
You never
a
know.
possibility too.
You just don't know, right? And,
Yeah.
You're always so positive, Al.
Yeah, well, yeah. I'm thinking all the way around. So, it's all got to be good. So when you're writing these stories, because a lot of it's research, so you can do that whenever you've got the opportunity and whenever you can go to a place or do the research. But when you're writing the story itself, do you have to be in a certain mood to write it?
I'm very disciplined, so no, I have a routine, and I actually like to do a lot of my work in coffee shops, and I think it comes from when I worked in newsrooms. Then there's been scientific studies that the ambient noise of a coffee shop is really conducive to really focusing. I guess it comes from working in a newsroom. I can shut everything out, and I kind of like noise around me. I don't listen to music while I'm writing, but it's just I can get so focused and in a zone, and I'm very disciplined about. I get up, I go, I work 3 or 4 hours in the morning, 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon, and then sometimes in the evening I'm doing stuff. I will say as a writer, it's constant. You're constantly thinking about something, whether it's the research or the writing or the marketing. You're always trying to be open to, ideas and stuff. So it's exhausting.
Yeah, I'm exhausted listening.
No, actually, it's fun. I enjoy it.
I think it's good. So you're not the type. See, I'm on that same wavelength, but I can sit down and if I'm trying to write, if I'm not in the right frame of mind, it's not going to happen. Like, I can't just go, okay, between 2 and 4 today, I've got nothing going on. I'll sit down and just write this. It doesn't quite happen for me that way. I don't mind all the noise and all the activity, but I can't just jump into it.
Yeah, sometimes it may be that I don't get much done. And we know it's so much of writing it really helps to get away from, like when you're doing the dishes, when you're doing another activity, and it kind of frees up your subconscious. And I can't tell you how many times it's happened to me where I think of something and I run to write it down because, I'm working on a plot point in my head or something that, motivation for a character, and it'll come in, when I'm doing something completely different, and then I'm racing to write it down.
Yeah. No, I get that. So are you one of those nutty people in the coffee shop really pretending to be there for something and you're listening to everyone?
I'll never tell.
Yeah, you're picking up information and listening to gossip and kind of going, yeah, okay, I like that, and I see. So, everyone's got to be aware of you. We'll make sure your picture's up as well. See this woman driving on the road.
Be careful around this woman.
Yeah, she's driving, pull to the side like an ambulance and wait. Do not follow this person. And if you see her in a coffee shop, turn around and leave.
Yeah.
Turn around. There's plenty of coffee shops. You don't need to be stuck there. You'll be the next victim in her book.
Well, and what's also funny, I don't drink coffee. I only drink tea.
See, no, the truth is coming out. See, now we're getting okay. Now, see, it takes a while to break them down, but let's get to the real stuff here. So you go to coffee shops pretending to be someone you're not, and you don't even drink coffee.
I know. Just a complete fraud.
Yeah, you go in there and start making coffee for people, and they think you work there, and you don't. I'm crazy. Well, it's certainly been interesting, and hopefully we make your day a little bit brighter. So now we're talking about the new book that came out today, which when the show airs, it's going to be out, so you better run out and buy it. Otherwise, Dave comes after you.
That's right.
And it's called The Lives of Bessie, and it's a novel. And the author has been our guest, Jody Hadlock. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderfully fun. I've really enjoyed it. So I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or show, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.